And it feeds you ideas, right? So like that video I mentioned, what if other departments worked in sales? It came because I watched you, Ross, and Ben chatting about like, hey, should other departments have a target over their head?
That's from this
Everything
podcast.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Listen to this
See,
podcast.
Pouyan? Value created.
Value, right?
If you ever
Value
doubted
created.
My work is done. Thank you.
it.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm
Sell
gonna
the company.
I'm gonna go get buzzed now. Will, you inspired me.
I'll be honest, I still don't fully believe you, but hey, we'll take your word for it.
That's some royalty-free shit, people. That's what we do.
Beyond Quota.
We're back. I'm Pouyan from Scratchpad, here with Corp.
Of
Good
Corp.
to see you again.
Great to see you as well. I know.
I still every time. But excited for today for another episode of Beyond Quota. We've got Will Aitken with us. Did I pronounce that right? Let me try it.
You nailed it. Yeah, most people
Okay.
go straight for Aitken, so thank you.
Okay. Well, we've got Will Aitken with us, and apart from having an awesome background that we'll get into on how it's actually been controversial, maybe in one or two cases, has a really interesting story around sales and content, and maybe even back to sales. So that's probably a first that I've heard.
Give us the quick, 1 minute elevator spiel on where you were, where you are.
So born in 1994 in the city of Milton Keynes, UK. Basically, I was in B2B sales for a little while there. I started making little TikToks. I was selling software to sales leaders. The personal brand was helping me out, but it got the attention of my now boss, Tyler Lassard at Vidyard. So he brought me on as a founding member of the sales B team. And now I've done the dark switch from sales to marketing, which Ross, you know all about, right?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
So yeah, that's the quick background. So right now, full-time content creator on behalf of SalesFeed.
I haven't heard that much in terms of the content that's out there. Right? It feels like, well, I shouldn't say this. Maybe I will. It's like everyone's creating content for salespeople now. As I sit in front of two people creating content for sales.
Yeah, everyone's a LinkedIn
Right.
influencer these days.
Yeah, totally. Sales influencers left and
TikTok.
right. Maybe I've just missed it, but right. But everything's on like, oh, you should, the question you should ask when you start, the follow-up email template you should send. Have you seen anyone actually take a deliberate accent approach? It's like, hey, go put yourself in a training program for 4 weeks, learn how to do this accent, and then start cold calling.
I sit next to a guy. So I went from sales to recruitment, and then I recruited salespeople. And that's how I knew I wanted to work in SaaS, because they're being paid really well. I used to sit next to this guy, and he was British, but he had Indian parents, and he actually went to training to sound less like because he actually found that had a direct result on his conversions. Now, I think that's not a fair comparison, but that is a thing that people will do. It's a shame, but I've definitely heard a lot of people have to go down that route.
I mean, there is implicit bias, explicit bias, racism. I mean, it's all of it, right? Like all you're trying to do is it's all psychology. And if there was like a single opening line that was the silver bullet, whoever comes up with that is a Nobel Prize winning billionaire at that point, because they're closing every deal. They're absolutely killing it. So, that's where I like personally struggle on the whole like sales content, sales like training. A lot of people are like, dude, give us more like serious stuff. And I'm curious on your thoughts about this, because you do much more. I mean, you obviously do the comedy stuff, which is great, but you also tend to do a little bit more actionable, like sales advice, like true sales advice, where I tend to like shy away from that because I don't feel like there is. I know it works for me, but it's not going to work for most other people.
Like what you just said there, Ross, as well. Like if there was one silver bullet, no, I'd hope they wouldn't tell everyone what it is, because everyone would go and ruin it. Like it stops being a silver bullet when everyone's doing it. It's no longer a pattern interrupt. It just stops being that. When everyone's doing it, it's no longer special. Now, for me, making actionable content, yeah, kind of. I still feel like an imposter, mate. Like I mentioned, I now work in marketing. I have recently, but I hadn't closed a deal for 9 months, and I was still posting about sales 3 months ago, right? And the way I look at it is, you don't have to take everything you read as gospel online. And I like to pick and choose. So I like, Jed Marley's point on how to deal with competitors, but I like, I don't know, John Selig's cold call opener because it's funny. So I like to look at it like that. It's kind of like a pick and mix. You don't have to take everything that someone says as gospel. I 100% miss. Like, and the people on TikTok, they let you know when you miss. They're ruthless. So like, it's okay. And like, I think that's just part of it. is that when you're out there looking at this advice, you just find stuff that works for you and you take that. And I find the best sellers kind of taking a bit of everywhere. They're not like, oh, I love David Sandler and I do everything he ever taught. That stuff came out like 30 years ago now, so they're probably doing a little bit of that, a little bit of Keenan or whatever. And I think that's how the best sellers take it. The newbies probably are taking a lot of stuff gospel and just, oh, Will said it, so I have to do it, right? So I think there's some nuances there, but that's how I look at it.
How'd you get into creating content in the first place? Tell us about that.
I've always loved attention, to be fair, right? It was probably naturally going to happen. I always wanted to be a YouTuber, like gaming or whatever. I don't know what it is. I started like 3 different YouTube channels, and now I use them all to like my own videos. But when I think I made a post in like January of last year, so it wasn't that long ago. And Sarah Brazier had just closed a deal with my company, Proposify, and I'd kind of been given her the inside scoop because I followed her and I was like, yeah, this is what's happening with Ops right now. I think we were churning from Chorus and going to Gong, so I was kind of giving her like what objections were coming up internally. And then I made a post and she liked it, and that obviously when you get people like that and like it kind of got a bit of momentum behind it. And I saw some direct kickback onto my pipeline from that. People requesting demos from me, people mentioning it during our calls when I was getting back on calls with customers as I was at NAE. So then I was like, oh, I should do more of this. And then I posted a meme about, there's this guy on TikTok and he goes, trade deal. I said, you get this and you get this. And I was like, should I start making sales TikToks? And everyone's like, yeah, do it. And then I just did that every day and it became a bit of a hobby. And then it became this.
How do you go about the content you put out there? Like, how do you think about that? Is it planned? Is it just whatever comes to mind?
Sometimes I think of an idea and I'll just write it down, but I've like got more ideas than I can action right now. So like it's more so like most of it's just in the moment. I think of something funny. I'm like, that's funny enough to make. Like probably the most successful video I've had to date was like, what if other departments got treated like sales? I was sick that day. I woke up feeling horrible, but I had this idea like right before I went to bed, and I woke up. I was like, I need to make that right now. And then it went ahead and became like, LinkedIn's obviously a little bit harder to go viral on, but it became the biggest post I've had on LinkedIn. And that's normally how everything goes. It's kind of like, what am I going to make today?
It's always the quickest stuff that's the best. It's always the stuff that comes in a moment of inspiration. Like you can sit down there and grind out a bunch of TikToks or like ideas, and then like you'll find they're uninspired and kind of contrived, and like they just don't hit the same. At least on TikTok though, you can like put out a volume. They want you to put out a volume of content. If something bombs, like no one sees it. It's not like Instagram where people go to your feed and are like combing through your feed. It's like they either get presented it or they don't. And like I think I used to hard avoid all other content. Like I didn't want to watch anybody else's content because I didn't want to be either accused or influenced or like inspired is a bad choice of word here, but inspired by somebody else's thing to do something similar. Cause I always was like, I'll come up with something original. I want it to like be totally different. And then I got to a point where I was like, why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just like with TikTok, like originality for better or worse has kind of gone away. And it's like, you can repurpose, like they've created kind of templates and like you can repurpose things for your own voice. And like, it doesn't matter for better or worse. Like old school people would be like, that's bullshit. Like new stuff, like you need to do blah, 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 blah. But now I'm kind of like, this is the game now. And this is how you got to play. And like, now I also sit there and watch a bunch of content, like much more than I'm like.
And it feeds you ideas, right? So like that video I mentioned, what if other departments worked in sales? It came because I watched you, Ross, and Ben chatting about like, hey, should other departments have a target over their head?
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, wouldn't that be a funny idea if everyone had? And then one of the comments was like, yeah, put, the marketer on a pip if she doesn't get 100,000 likes in the next Instagram post. And then I saw that and I was like, oh, that tapered off, right? So it's not necessarily copying, but it's like looking for inspiration in places, right? It's
totally.
Like
that's from this podcast.
Everything yeah, exactly. Yeah. Listen to this podcast.
See, Pouyan? Value created.
Value, right?
If you ever doubted it.
My work is done. Thank you. I'm gonna
sell the company.
I'm gonna go get buzzed now. Will, you inspired me.
What do you think the future of like content creation in B2B is? Like, do you think, every reputable B2B company at some point will have and I know you hate the term, so do I, like evangelist or like a chief content creator or a content machine of some sort that is that is not traditional marketing?
I think one in every category at least. I think the issue companies have is because they've got VC funding and they got these investors who are like, give us metrics, show us where the money's coming from, is that this is a really hard thing to justify. And it's not cheap to hire even if you're, let's say you're a HR tech company, right? It's so easy for us to get trapped in this like revenue tech space because we sell it. And it's easy for a salesperson to become a marketer. there is potential for someone who's in HR to go and join a marketing team for a HR tech company, right? That's a potential as well. We're not even thinking about those things. The issue is the metrics attached to this type of role are like likes and comments. It is so hard to prove attribution of this kind of thing that you do really need a forward-thinking founder and VC and board really behind it to actually make it happen. And most companies just don't have that. So I think at least one in every category will jump in on this and make a ton of money from it, because I do know that we've seen some people who are like, it's the soft stuff that you can't, it's hard to measure, but when you put in your gong thing, like pick up for the word Will Aitken being said out loud, and you start to see that in sales conversations that a Vidyard are having, well, at that point, like it's like the light bulb stuff going off, and they're like, oh, right, okay, this is actually, it's feeding in somewhere, we're just having a hard time tracking it. But that's the biggest challenge. So maybe if tracking gets better on that side of things, if social listening and all that improves, then it'll become more common. For the time being, I think it's still a risky, especially now, it's a risky venture for a lot of companies.
Like content creation needs to be more authentic and more raw and more truthful. And a lot of companies are scared of those truths and like customers seeing those truths or hearing kind of how the other side thinks, or even how both sides think. I think like, the reason like doing this stuff for salespeople is probably the easiest, isn't the right word, but the best fit for like consumers of like comedy towards their profession and so forth. Whereas like, I mean, you see all these cybersecurity guys who are just like freaking out on LinkedIn about God knows what, like what a side, like a CISO, like a security analyst, like content look like. Maybe I'm sure there's something.
Oh yeah,
but
they're probably not on LinkedIn because they're trying to hide from us and our
yeah.
horrible sales messages. But to be fair, Pouyan, like I'd like to throw the question back on you, because you kind of got a similar thing going on with Ross, and Ben does a lot of content as well.
I think you're right, and trying to find good old Roy in this journey is hard, or ROI, I should say. Good old Roy. I think you have to change your thinking on it. And I actually think it's more of a foundational belief of, do you believe that good storytelling will have an impact in some way, shape, or form on what you do? And I certainly do. I actually think storytelling is one of the most important skill sets to learn, whether you're going into sales, to marketing, definitely if you're going into starting anything, right? Especially a company, because all you're doing is telling stories, right? When you're trying to raise your first round, hire your first folks, it's all story. You don't, maybe you have an early version of a product, right? So I come from that school of thought and that belief that stories matter. I believe people consume and remember stories a lot better than anything else. So for me, it's actually a lot easier to like lean into this and say, listen, I don't know exactly what metrics we're going to track or what necessarily the outcome will be. I just fundamentally believe that this is an important thing to do. And in parallel to that, though, I think you also have to believe that it's a creative endeavor versus a scientific endeavor. Because to your point, like you called it before, how many misses do you have before you have one that finally lands? And how many times do you go through something and you learn, and then your own mental model improves and you start saying, okay, like I start building this intuition that this type of content is going to work better than that one.
Depends on the type of company you're running too. Like, when you're doing kind of a PLG, like when you're end user, or at least early on for Scratchpad, obviously it's changed now where like leadership and RevOps are like very much involved in this. But like in the OG, most basic form is like, we're trying to get in front of sales reps, and like sales reps are watching content. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, like they're out there. And like, obviously I believe the same thing around storytelling. And if you can create some sort of positive association, some positive feeling in conjunction with your brand, then that can only be net positive. And it may not manifest for years. It may not, manifest in the way that we think it will at all, but who knows, like, where that story and how far it can reach and influence people.
But but back to what you were saying, Will, on the approach, I think you have to have at the highest levels leadership bought into the creative process, and that recognize that, most of the times there are misses, and sometimes you have to test the boundaries to know that, okay, like that went a little bit far, we need to bring it back. Without that, then I think it's hard.
The one that probably because it was at that line, right? That line is always a place where they can do really well. It's just about knowing how far you can go on it.
But I wonder if you could take this outside the PLG movement too, and just start like, why not start creating content? I mean, go to the extreme. Why not start creating content for other CEOs? Right? You talk about going high and wide in a deal, right? You certainly want to multi-thread up, but like to that extreme,
CEOs
why
are a
not?
TAM issue, but
That is true.
but a valuable,
From a
enterprise type deal.
TAM issue from what the TAM issue from maybe the number of them,
Right,
but
yes.
TAM issue it could actually be huge from a
dollar value much
perspective.
higher. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's the silver bullet right there, Will. You start getting the CEO to say, I want to buy this from every target company you have, you'll probably do well on your quota.
The problem is not enough CEOs are watching content.
That's the thing as well, and the reach relies on like it scales, right? The reason why it's easier to make content for the sales rep is because there's hundreds of thousands of sales reps, but there's probably only tens of thousands of VPs of sales. So it becomes smaller and smaller, and the way you get them to see the content is like because it gets liked by one person, which shows it to 2 more people. So you'd have to find like a core network, shake some hands, and get them to like it, so their friends will see it, right? There's probably some thoughts to that. I'm gonna go shake some hands at SaaStr and then do it.
Or if it's valuable enough, just go direct.
Yeah, we'll see it, SaaStr.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
Send it straight to him. That's a really good point as well. People don't do that. They're way too polite about content. You send me a funny video, I'm gonna be like, "Thank you, that was awesome," right?
Well, that's what Ben and I are gonna do. We're gonna be cold calling CEOs to watch Sales Are Dope when that comes out.
Are you actually
a big part of our campaign? Yeah, Ben and I are gonna be on the phones, just calling sales VPs and CEOs and be like, "You need to watch this."
You're gonna get some great content out of that.
Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah. Did the same thing.
I have a feeling I'm on that list of not being called, but be like, hey, Pouyan, we need some extra bandwidth here. So could you join in and start cold calling with us?
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to need some executive leadership here, lead from the front, maybe hop on some of these calls for us.
Let's get our engineering team involved. I think that would be fun to start getting.
That would be actually hilarious videos. Engineers cold calling to watch the show and have them cold call about that. There you go. There's a... Oh God, I can already feel them cringing.
Make a cold call. Yes.
Yeah.
Make marketing do it. Well, actually, you got Ben, so that counts. And Ross. Sorry, all of you, really.
Okay, spare me. First of all, I am a consultant. I'm a consultant.
I'd be curious to see, like, if you called someone and was like, "Hey, it's Beyond, the CEO of Scratchpad," and you started the call like that. I'd be curious because I always used to, when I was a little excuse making cold call, I'd be like, "Oh, it's easy for you because you can say you're the sales manager." I always thought my leaders had like an extra card in their pocket because they could say, "Hey, I'm the VP of sales." I wonder if there'd be any noticeable difference.
I think there's definitely a difference. Like, I think if you're on par with someone like Pouyan calls a CEO, they're much more likely to listen as like an equal and peer. Whereas like we're just a bunch of sales gnats at the bottom, just a bunch of ants crawling around, just looking for scraps. They know.
Yes. All right. Well, Will, so we're getting up on time. Maybe let's just ask. I heard you want to get back into sales.
Who told you that?
Little bird.
A little birdie that flew by. But one, is that correct? And if so, that's an interesting one because usually we talk to folks that have found their way out. They stumbled into it somehow.
Couldn't be happier.
But yeah,
to
found their way out. But you're.
I'm selling stuff right now, but not crazy active. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to sell budget so I can spend more money on the stuff I'm making, basically. And we figured out the best way to increase my budget of how much good content I can make. And well, I've got the camera, but take me places like to, I don't know, San Francisco and whatnot. To get that, I'm going to need to find that somewhere. So I'm starting to sell sponsorships for sales feed to reinvest back in the brand, and ideally bring that value straight back to the vendor. We're getting a lot of eyes on us right now, so I'm basically having some conversations like those. So 3 so far. But 2 of them are little ones, and 1 of them is okay size. So that's what I'm doing now, and it feels good because I feel like less of an imposter when I'm talking about sales again. Right?
That's definitely the hardest part about doing sales content when you're not on the floor every day. Can 1,000,000% relate to that. I'm like, damn, am I getting out of time? Am I turning into the VP who doesn't know what's what anymore?
Exactly.
It's
been 13 years.
I feel that happening, and I hate it.
That's why you and Ben got to make those cold calls.
Well, Ross, anytime you just want to get back into it, and you feel like this is a day to start making some cold calls. We run that PLG motion. We've got the leads. You can throw them over for you anytime. Pick up the phone and just make some calls.
Send me a couple CEOs. Really, just let me start at the top. Let me work with my people.
Just burn the best leads.
Yeah.
You gotta open with, hey, it's Corp Bro. Like that's how you gotta open though. That's I reckon you gotta.
What's up, Johnny? It's Corp Bro here. How you doing, man?
So Will, 2 questions. What is your What's your recovery song first? You're in Australia. You just get laid into
Someone
by
drops a C-bomb on you like 5 times.
Yeah.
It's not funny anymore. It was funny the first 4 times.
I'd probably go down some T-Swizzle for one.
Okay.
T-Swift, Taylor.
Yeah.
Um,
Familiar.
some-
Familiar with her.
yeah. Little known country singer out of Nashville. And for the song of hers that I'd probably go for Love Story, or maybe even like Teardrops on My Guitar or White Horse, one of those.
So what's your opposite? What's the hype song?
Yeah.
Hype song, you got to go. I'm either going down AC/DC Thunderstruck or X Gon' Give It Ya.
Well, and last but not least, Will, please, this is the time to be shameless, self-promote. Where can people find you? Where should they look for you? If they want to reach you, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, if you want to contribute to the sales feed budget, then hit me up on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active, probably. Sales feed, Will Aitken. I'm on TikTok and LinkedIn for the most part. Those are the best places to reach me. And yeah, you'll know what to expect when you get there. It's kind of like knockoff Ross, but in its own way.
No, dude, it's more.
And it's not
stately
intentionally
Ross.
knockoff Ross. It's kind of like it's a different thing, but it's that
Ross with an accent, so therefore taken more seriously.
There you go, taken far more seriously.
You know, far more credibility.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us.
Beyond